Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Century Countess. Today is part 2 of Secrets of Behind the Smile, the history of the Century Countess. And I thought since this is going to be more of the audio bit, less special effects, unfortunately, we would, instead of just sitting here chatting about it, I do some makeup while sharing. So, this sequence of the video is basically how we came up with the design for the Countess, how in the past, this is going to sound crazy, the story, the curse within the story became a curse in reality. We're also going to be talking about the Countess's first unexpected physical appearance. And then the cemented legacy, and then how it got to become a YouTube channel. So that's all we're sharing today. So, which will be the final segment, including the 2 versions of the Countess. The original, which is in the Rose Hall saga, and the one that you see here on Century Countess. So, without further ado, let us begin. And before I begin, I would also want to mention what I mean by the one that you see on Century Countess isn't my goth self. No. That is not a costume. That is reality. That is me every day. I am goth. I refer to when I get into drag as the character, the Countess. It is considered a drag character, but for me, I consider it a caricature because I do more than one character on this channel. So, the appearance of the Countess has mostly remained the same. The only thing that seems to change has been either the tint of the hair color. It has always been dark, so it's either been dark brown or black, so those are the 2 primary colors, so I refer to it as tint. Everything else has basically remained the same. The only thing that has continuously changed has been the eye color of the Countess. So I'll give you a full anatomy of the Countess. A very striking, tall, thin lady. Dark hair, either black or dark brown, really dark brown, like to the point where it almost looks like it's black. Pale skin. Puffy, kind of rosy lips. A long, kind of almost swan-like neck, borderline swan-like neck. Not ugly swan neck, but more elegant swan neck. Her color palette and clothing. The main primary colors has been red and black and gold. Sometimes it has gone to solid black. And then we have her iconic bridal colors, which has always been silver, pigment, maybe thin pigments of gold. Her iconic pendant, which is the C pendant, which over time has become a less symbolic thing, but in the early ages of the Countess, it has been something that she has worn over the decades, somehow fusing it with the jewelry of the day from whichever portrait she's posing in. She gets that C pendant to blend in with the century as she does. Let me look in my mirror, see if I'm getting it alright, because as you know, it may look good on camera, but when you see it for yourself in the mirror, you might see imperfections. I'm already seeing eyebrow stubble poking out. And I brand a razor through these. I do not know, and this is a brand new razor, so my brows are very stubborn, I guess. The stubble, at least. Even when I feel the stubble going away. But anyway, we're straying off subject. So, her eye color has either been blue, a very pale blue, between a blue-gray or a soft gray or a medium gray. But her main primary eye color as of now has been brown, a dark brown. So, dark hair, dark eyes, pale skin, she basically, stands out. Nothing compared to what classic films have done in the past. You know how the blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl is always the innocent, sweet one. Very rarely we get that innocent brunette. And whenever we do get a brunette, she's always the bad bitch. So, that's basically the Countess. She's the bad bitch. Misunderstood. Etc., etc. So, let's see. That's basically the physical appearance of the Countess. Her hair has always been long. There has been a very rare time it's been short, mainly possibly in the 1920s when we kind of flirted with a storyline with the 1920s. It was flapper, finger waved. Okay. Now, let's see. On to the controversy. I'm going to refer to it as controversy. It's probably not the right word. So, the story, as you know, started in the late 90s, or near the end of the 90s, I should say, 1998. It progressed all the way through middle school and high school. And then it finally became a story that I shared in my drawings and my portraits when I was in transitional housing. We had a section for artists who would like to do the drawings. No one was doing them, so I just thought, okay, I'll just put all the pictures of the Countess up. And there was people. Now, this goes back into the physical count. This is where fiction starts to merge into non-fiction. Just like the stories, whenever the Countess walked in, people were attracted to her. There were a few men in the transitional housing who inquired who the drawing was, because at the time the drawing was quite realistic. I no longer have those drawings. I will explain why very soon. But let's see. I'm remembering as I'm thinking. So I'm trying to remember this because this was some years ago. So one guy made a comment. I can't really express it was R-rated. Let's just say it was R-rated, not inappropriate R-rated to where it was disturbing. But somebody asked if the lady was my mother because she was quite hot, in his own words. But he said something else. But he did ask if it was my mother. And let's just say he made a little comment. Like, basically, he was interested in boinking the Countess. So I told him, no, it's a fictional character. I shared a slammy bit of the story, because this was a macho guy. He wasn't going to be interested, but he certainly, literally, let's just say, the magic of the Countess's beauty worked out of fiction. Let's just say that. So, there was also jealousy with the drawings. In fact, this is where and I'm sure you've heard of it with Teletubbies and other popular TV shows where somebody weaponizes religion or weaponizes something to get it taken off air, like with the Teletubbies, how the lady said that character, since it's carrying a purse, it's gay, I don't like it, religious this, religious that, take it down, let's do a protest, let's do a one of those things where people sign their names to get it, basically, and the amount of names is, if there's enough amount of names, I forget what they call it, but when there's enough amount of names, you can get it, you get some sort of proof, like, hey, I hate it, 1,000 people hate it, take it off. So, Basically, it was this type of person who was using the same old face. So I won't say her name. So we're just going to call her Karen 1. Karen 1 was very narcissistic. I don't want to say she was narcissistic, but she had, the best way to describe it, let's just say you gained a little bit of weight, they walk up to you, they pat you on the belly and like, what's wrong? What's going on here? What's going on here? That type of thing. So, and she was a lady of color. And then she makes a complaint at the EC meeting that she felt like the wall of art was a form of racism because there's no colored woman on the wall. She made a big deal about it. She started going around trying to protest her issues. It wasn't going anywhere, but anyone that she could, like, literally whine to, she whined to. And this lady had, was on again, off again with breast cancer. She was semi-pretty. But, when people show off they're ugly, you can't really see the pretty anymore. So I'm saying semi-pretty because her attitude was ugly. She kept trying to interrogate me, trying to force me to draw a character, so I drew Carlotta. She didn't like that. She didn't like it. I said, well, she certainly looks a lot like you. I went there. Yes, I went there. I said, you were the model. I went there because I was getting so sick and tired of being bullied and being told that and she even said that if I didn't put a lady of color on there, she was going to tear them down herself, which was a no-no in our building. So, in retaliation, I put that picture of Carlotta up there. And whenever somebody asked, and here's the thing, when people asked, they kept saying, is that Karen 1? And I said, yes, it is. So Karen 1 was temporarily the inspiration for Carlotta's physical appearance. Karen 1 shut up after that, and then she found some other things. Like, for one, there was a time where she had a strain in her hair, and just to be nice, she had just graduated from her cooking class, so I made her a little figurine, and at the time, her hair was straight. But when I got it finished and presented it to her, I'm just trying to be nice, she's like, this is not me. My hair's not straight. And I said it was straight when it was straight a couple of weeks ago. And she's like, oh, well, thank you. It was in the trash, by the way. I saw it in the trash, in the kitchen, later that night during my cooking shift. So, and that clay's not cheap. So in my head I was like, this person needs a dose of karma, and I just told myself, she has done nothing but literally bully me. I think it's jealousy. And here's where I believe, well, at the time, it was coincidental. I just said, you know what, she's made herself into an enemy, like Carlotta's made herself into an enemy. Carlotta got it bad at the end. So it was just wishful thinking. 2 weeks later, she disappears. A month later, somebody announces at the next meeting that she's at hospice. Didn't know she was in hospice. And this person was offering invites for anyone who wanted to say their last goodbyes. I didn't go. I didn't say anything. 2 days later, she was dead. So, here's where the coincidence starts to kind of get scary. This is where I don't want to say I fake. This is where it's so hilarious that, a fictional curse that I created in a storyline somehow gets its way into reality. There was another person who overheard the story about the Countess. This guy was disgusting. He worked the night shift. I'm not going to say what his name was, so we'll say his name was Turd. And you're going to find out why I call him Turd. So Turd talks about cleanliness and everything. Well, Our dining area opens up at 9:30 p.m. He works at I'm going to say his night shift security duty was at 1 o'clock on certain nights. So he would come in, fix his coffee, and he'd start scratching himself. And we'd talk about, like, he would, like, dive into his pants, scratch his ass, and we're talking about him doesn't wash, and then goes on his shift after he has his coffee. And meanwhile, I'm, like, in the dining room, way away from him, sketching something, drawing something, writing, anything, because I'm a night creature. I don't go to bed early, I go to bed late. So he overhears the whole story about the Countess, and he goes into a religious fanatic freak mode, basically saying how he was raised to hate people who were into witchcraft and everything. He says that the lady haunts him in his sleep. He was basically showing, unhinged behavior. Unhinged. Very unhinged. He was saying stuff about me. And it's like, you don't know my story. I don't know where... And some of the things that he was saying was in reference to my mother. Big no-no. Some of the stuff that he was saying was, like, made up. It's like, how is he getting this information? Who is sharing this information? Because it's not the right information. Whenever I did share stuff about my mother, I hardly share stuff with my mother. That's a whole other story. But I don't know. He must have heard something or overheard something and then just added to the truth. So basically he was saying that, his mother was a witch, his father was a religious man. He did some shit to put his mother in her place for what she was into. Basically a lot of hate. And it resulted in a whole deal. He wrote me up. He wanted to have a meeting to basically witch hunt me. So, and he kept talking about how this woman in the portrait tormented him. It's a lady in a painting. How can she torment you? So I just kept saying, this man is so crazy. I want something done, and I want something done now in my head. The meeting happens. He's laughed out of the meeting. He is so mad that he stops living in our building. He camps outside. Staff tell him, you need to go. You need to go. This, if you're not going to do your position, if your chore in order to qualify to live here, if you're not even going to live in the building, and it's just an empty bed that's not being used, you gotta go. He eventually did. And he went back to the place that he said, from what he said from a friend of his that was a friend of mine, that person said he went back, I'm not going to say where, but he told stories about where he came from and how it traumatized him. He went right back there. That's what I heard. From secondhand, so that tells you something. That's when I started to think, is my character a curse? It's like, because half the time, because in the storyline, if anyone says ill stuff about the Countess, especially when you go to the stories about Rose Hall, especially some of the teaser bits that I've shared about, what happens when a bride insulted the Countess for not getting married, she gets hers in the end, and then what happens when somebody destroys the Countess's happiness, their entire family's wiped out, and they find out that they actually ate their family's hearts before dying of a heart attack themselves. So it's just, it's weird. It's very weird. So after that, for the safety of the drawings and the paintings, what little paintings that I did, they were moved to another floor for their safety in an area where I know that was very active. So if anyone wanted to do something, they would have had to been up late at night. We're talking about the only time there's nobody in there is about 3 or 4 in the morning. So, in comes Karen 2. Karen 2. This time, I am 100% not kidding you. This one was the perfect concept design for Carlotta. Her attitude was like Carlotta. Literally, it was like living with a fictional character brought to life who had like these ideas of grandeur. So Karen too didn't like me because there was an incident where she was a roommate with a friend of mine and she was stealing her stuff. She was wearing items without her permission, and she was also putting stuff in front of the heater that was dangerous, etc., etc. So because I was a witness to some of that behavior, I was just a witness, she retaliates against me, and ever since, she started sliding Bible verses under my door. She started listening in on the stories of the Countess, and she basically, like the crazy guy, like Mr. Turd, goes into a religious fanatic, and she even confronts me when I tell them the story about this illustration design from a scene from the world of the Countess. She says how it disturbed her, how it was a sin, how it did this with her religion, a couple of Bible verses. Then she tried to hug me, and I backed off, and I said, get the F away from me right now. I don't want to hear it anymore. So 3 days later, and like I said, there was evidence that she did it because she wrote, people recognized her handwriting. The portraits and pictures were all vandalized. There was Bible verses on some of the little title bits that I typed up explaining the story about the portraits, the title, etc., etc., when they were made, yada, yada, yada. And the EC at the time recognized the handwriting. They knew it was her. Nothing. You want to know why? We don't want to throw a 79-year-old woman out in the cold for vandalism, yada yada. And I was scared at the time. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to file a report. The reason why I said no is because at the time, staff was like, do not call the police. Let us handle it. If you call the police without our consent, you're automatically out. At the time, I didn't know that was a thing you do not do. Which is probably why the place that I used to live in is no longer controlled by them, because who knows, somebody probably out of their asses, and now it's a complete different routine now, and the staff that were there are all gone, just about. So I don't know, but that's a whole other story. So yeah, but karma came back at her, and it came back at her hard. We're talking about very hard. She wanted to audition for Jazz Alley. They rejected her. And I heard this from my friend who is still her roommate, still dealing with her crap. And she basically said it was a hate crime because they didn't like how she looked. And it gets even better. She got into some serious trouble when she decided she wanted to try to push another friend of mine down the stairs at the apartment complex where she lives now, at least lived presently at the time. This was years after I moved out of there, got my housing, my present housing, and then she got her housing not too far from where I live. And a friend lived there. She was married to a man who was white. Karen too, for some reason, did not like the fact that a lady of color was married to a white man. She was a lady of color, and according to what I heard, it did not stop her from trying to mess around with a pastor who was white and married, but we're not going to go into there. It just shows you that it's just an example that she's a hypocrite. She didn't like the fact that this girl was pregnant, so she tried to push her down the stairs. She was ready for it. She caught herself, and when she tried to do it again, she grabbed the lady by the wrist and pulled her down. So Karen too got to tumble down the stairs. Karen too was the one who got in trouble. So that is the curse of the Countess. But we're not done. We're almost 25 minutes in, and we're not done. So now that you know that there is a possibility that there is a curse on a story about a lady who's cursed, who spreaded a curse, And it's like literally too coincidental. It's like, did I create a curse without even knowing it? And it was just all from fiction. So yeah, I know it sounds unhinged, but it's like it's the best ghost story ever. And it is part of history, so you've got, when history comes, you got to share all the goods and the negatives. Now we're going to start talking about a little bit of the positives before we convert back to the negative. So, the Countess also was a mystery game. I used to host Halloween parties where I used to live, and this is way before the Karens came in. I'm trying to stay on subject while concentrating at the same time. I apologize, you guys. So, it was a mystery. There was a wedding that had gone wrong. And people had to basically, I came up with a good storyline. People had to basically figure out the mystery of what happened at the wedding. There was clues everywhere with little notes that basically explain where the next clue was. They were not allowed to pick up the clue. They were not allowed to take the clue because, people had, but they had their own, the evidence clue, I should say. But they could pick up their own personal tab note. And then whoever could solve the mystery got a prize. So that was another fun thing about the Countess. There was a murder mystery game that I made, and it was played out on Halloween night. And it gets even better. So, years later, when I had my own house, well, not my own house, my own apartment, I should say, I used to go to this day center, and they would have this every third Saturday of the month event. Somebody suggested, we really like you're so passionate about this character, you're so passionate about creativity, why don't you do a drag performance with this character? I'm very nervous because it's like, the Countess has never had a physical form, literally a physical appearance. So we're talking about bringing a character to life. I was nervous. The outfit that I wanted did not show up in time, and this is when I first ordered something overseas, and I did not know the time wait. It arrived, I want to say, a week after the show, so I had to come up with like a last minute thing. What I came up with, I did not like. In fact, some people referred to it, said that the way I was dressed, I looked like I was performing gospel when you saw the photos. It looked like I was standing in front of a church choir and singing in fancy dress. So that basically gives you a description of what dress I found. It was red, of course, it was red. But kind of vintage looking. But it was as close as I could get. And that was basically the debut of the Countess, the improper debut. The proper debut came at the next event. The next performance I did. And it was more appropriate then. And then, from then on, I just became the hostess. Well, one of the hostesses, I should say. And from then on, things were good for a little while until somebody that was working there that I thought was a really cool person that was like saying that she was an ally. They were, part of the LBG community because they had they had somebody in their family that was LBGTQ plus, the whole harangue. But whenever they were asked to do like activities LGBT related, they would turn it down. They would scoff. So it was all I could say. It was all talk. It was all talk. It was true that they had somebody in their family, but it was everything else that they said that they did was all a show. They just said it to show out, but when you asked them to actually, to partake, they didn't. They got rude. And when their bestie got hired, who was a former, and here's the thing, never hire former ongoers, former clients to be employers, because it gets over their head. This person got over their head. They said some rude shit to me. I confronted them to that person because I thought I could trust them. They said they were just tired and exhausted. And I left. I left after I was humiliated. I'm not going to go into details of that humiliation, but let's just say it was very disrespectful the last night I performed. Very disrespectful. And the last bit I'm going to say about that is the next day when the original facilitator came back, because they substituted that night, the last night I performed. I kept saying, I need to talk to you. Something happened at open mic and you need to know, because it was not okay. They said they didn't have time to talk to me because this organization had come in and they had to basically look good, but they had plenty of time to talk to them about it. So they got their side of the story first. So I was like, you know what? Not only was that disrespectful because you basically lied to me that you didn't have time, but you had time to talk to them about it, and I overheard you. I overheard you talking to them about it after you said you couldn't talk to me about it. So I just left. I just up and left. No questions, just up and left. Even though I was signed up for some sort of table cleaning position, I was done. I was like, you know what? Screw it. And I had to get my therapist involved because they constantly called me, telling me I need to do my job. How is it my job? You said I don't do anything for shit. And that's a whole other story. That's basically their excuse. And then they said to come back to do my job. Pay me. So it continued all the way up to December. Therapist got involved to let them know, it's like, look, he told you that he left, and that's it. So as soon as an organization got involved, they finally stopped. Alright, makeup is done. Hold on a sec, I need to breathe. And we're back. So, as I was saying, we left. We weren't sure what to do next because we still wanted to perform. We managed to find our own show in our building, and we're still doing it. Semi-still doing it. Long story short, I've discussed stories about that, what's going on with it now, but that's a whole other story. But hold on, trying to focus while doing shit, sorry. So anyway, also people were asking me, why don't you, you're really good at stuff, why don't you do your own YouTube channel? You love watching these DIYs, people do makeup, people do sew, why don't you do your own? So I did that, which was, I want to say 1 or 2 years before COVID. We were going well. I decided to turn the Countess into this DIY person, take you from reality to another realm, learning the history of costume, the story of costume, the history of people, while she made costumes based on what that person wore. And It went well, but we barely had what we have now. So filming wasn't that great. It was like slideshows. You had to read. You know, it was basically whatever we could find we could do that gave us the whatever ability we had at the time. But over time it got better, and as you know, it expanded. It expanded into something greater. You got more characters. The Countess basically developed what I now call the Mr. Hyde and Jekyll form, which is you have Dr. Jekyll, which is the person that teaches you how to sew, teaches you history bits, comical scenes and films of her other characters, with hints of her original behavior from you don't want to get her angry, otherwise something's going to happen, and your stay at the Fashion Palace Hotel may not last. And then you have the original formula, which is in the world of Rose Hall. And those of you who have read the audio stories of Rose Hall know the Countess's personality. Know her more after watching this documentary. And so now you kind of have an idea of why there's two forms of the Countess. And now you know a better thing about the Countess. Let's see. Where are my gloves? Where did I put my gloves? Hold on. One final thing I'd like to share about the Countess is one particular character I forgot to mention. Another flavor of the Countess formula was Angelique from, not the movie with Johnny Depp, but the original Gothic series, Dark Shadows. So some of that flavor for vengeance, determination to make sure that vengeance continues. Even when the curse was broken for a short bit, she made sure that curse was right back on him. Barnabas, I should say. So yeah, that was another thing. And then one other thing I need to also mention is the love story between the Countess and the Count Saint Germain. The Count Saint Germain was not the original main love interest. As you know, Edward VI, both she, the Countess, and he were born the same year, same age. There was affection there. If you saw in the part one of the documentary, the way the Countess was talking about Edward, there was hints the two had affection. That was the first tragic love story. In the original draft of the Countess, in the Victorian era, there was a guy named Jocks, and Jocks was identical to an older version of Edward VI, but he was engaged. So it was going to be kind of like a Bram Stoker Dracula type of vibe, where she sees the reincarnation of her lover. There was already somebody that won his heart, and it was going to be that type of a story. That was thrown out at the table when we learned about Count Saint Germain. He was an immortal who admitted he was an immortal, who talked about things like he had been there. People from, I believe, Florence, England, and France were fascinated by him. He even prophesied the French Revolution. Tried to give the royals there kind of like a heads up. It's like, hey, you guys are about to get your heads chopped off. You might want to consider going before the end of the year, yada yada. Didn't listen to him. It happened. And after that, he disappeared, and there was some sightings in the New Orleans in America of an incident where it hinted at vampirism. And then there was the 70s conspiracy where it was this, I forget what the guy's position was, but he kept saying he was basically Count Saint Germain. He talked about secret passages in Versailles, etc., etc. And then, he passed away, and then there has not been any sightings, but his resemblance to the portrait of Count Saint Germain, the only one that's not publicly displayed, was said to have been identical to this dude. He also had the ability to make gold, which is what Count Saint Germain was capable of doing. So I fought an immortal lady who thought, she was going to be stuck, living forever, never going to be able to settle down. There was no way this curse was going to be lifted. She found somebody, and there was a chance that, if she had to spend eternity, she would at least have somebody with her that kind of understood her situation, who probably was also feeling a little bit alone, that type of thing. So that's how the storyline is now set today. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this makeup chat story in the part 2 of History Behind the Smile, the history of Century Countess. Please like, subscribe, hit that bell, and this concludes our 400 sub celebration. See you later!